we did a load of work, and he kind of came back and went, what's all this? It's a bit crap. Are you going to bring it or not?
What do you think were some of the biggest challenges at the start of the project?
There were either smash it briefs or don't f it up briefs. My fear was it was a don't f it up brief.
Yeah, we could have a whole separate hour-long conversation about that.
I almost shit myself 52 times because essentially I was then worried that this beautiful thing we'd managed to land on was going to get somehow spoiled, sullied, unbought or not made.
Where did you go from there?
We made crazy stuff. We tried to make some cubes, you know those things in urinals that clean the urinal? We wanted to make some of those.
Wait, what's going on?
So my name's Nils Leonard. I'm one of the founders of Uncommon Creative Studio. Apparently I'm the creative one. You can be the judge after this podcast. And my role on the EAFC project was to lead the project. It was a key piece of work for the studio. So I like to focus on all the work that we do actually. I kind of led that from start to finish.
All right. So I want to know about you personally, Nils. Like, I know you're the cool creative one in your group, apparently. But like personally, are you a big footballer? Is that like a part of who you are?
No, I love football. I mean, I grew up, I'm a Chelsea fan for my sins. My dad was a Chelsea fan. That's how you get ingrained over here. I now live in Arsenal territory, so I can't watch a match without getting my head kicked in where I live. But I am a football fan. I'm also a massive gaming fan. I mean, I love gaming, obsessed with it, and on a real one. Even when I was a kid, I was obsessed with a crew called the Bitmap Brothers, who I don't know if you remember, made a couple of games, Xenon 2, Speedball, Gods, Magic Pockets. These guys were like the first kind of gaming celebs, in that there'd been great games, but no one knew who'd made them. And the Bitmap Brothers almost came from out of there. So I've been obsessed with it for as long as I can remember and always harbored a kind of want to play in that world. So this was a dream when this came.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I am personally a fan of video games. I love them, but it's more in theory because I have no time to play them. And I want to, though. Like if I could just make a little more time.
Yeah, I think we have to compromise our lives if we're going to play them. So we have to basically get divorced or lose our jobs. That's the sort of No, I mean, honestly, I'm upset. I love Ghost of Tsushima, right? So I know that we're not talking about that today, but that game is unbelievable. It's like going on a holiday or something when you play it. I got into it deep for like 3 months. I realized I was getting about 2.5 hours sleep a night when I was playing that. So I was like, maybe need to chill on the...
Yeah, take it back a notch. I play FC24 with my son, but I'll be honest, it's not a harmonious experience. It creates division.
Yeah, in a good way. Yeah, that's great.
We do love it. We're big fans of it. All right, so let's talk about like the very first time you heard about this opportunity to work with EA Sports. Like, can you explain that? Do you remember when that was?
Vaguely. I mean, again, maybe I'm rewriting this in my head, but I'll give it to you as I remember it. I mean, weirdly, we tend not to do a lot of pitches, and I can't even tell you whether or not this was a pitch or not. And that sounds weird, but we don't really think about anything we do like that. And I guess maybe this is something to talk about, but I used to, in my previous life in an agency and so on, I used to try and pitch to win. And I think that's a big flaw in our industry. So let me just unpack that for a bit, in that most people would do anything to win a pitch, okay? And they kind of go, I'm going to pitch to win. And they've got win, lose, draw chart under their desk. And they're like, God, I want to fucking win this and I want to do all the above. And then they win it, and then they try and make the work they want to make. And they realize that to win it, they compromised on all those other values. So then forever backpedaling to try and make the work they want to make. So what we started to do at Uncommon was we said, look, let's do an experiment where we pitch the work we want to make with the approach we want to make. And we only ever do that. And if we only ever do that, if we win things, we'll win them on the right footing. So forgive me. And often that means we don't think about things like a pitch. So when EA came knocking, I'd heard a few things, good and bad, actually, being candid, about EA Sports, about what they were like to work with. Obviously I was immediately like, oh my God, this is fucking awesome. But then was also a bit like, I'd spoken to a couple of people and they were like, oh, you got to be careful. They're a big organization, they're very slow, they're very safe. Those are the things I'd heard, right or wrong. And so we entered into it with a bit of trepidation, but we sort of said to ourselves, look, let's see what this is all about. And we originally thought they'd got in touch for a brand advertising brief, and actually realized it wasn't. It was for a design brief off the back of some of the stuff we'd done.
And at that point, was the mention of the FIFA partnership being dropped? Was that like pretty clear at the very beginning?
Not initially. They were sort of like, there's a project we might do, and there's some sort of change happening. And we positioned the studio, I don't know how much you know, as I mean, built for brands in a moment of change. That's sort of what we like to do. And we realized it's the sort of sweet spot for us and the type of work we want to make. We're not really who you go to for a slightly different shade of blue. And they sort of came along and said, no, we're really in a moment of change. And that first meeting, they were like, well, look, we might be moving away from FIFA and whatever. And of course, literally, I think that was, it felt like it was 3 weeks after that guy threw a load of cash all over Seb Blatter or whatever. Do you remember that event?
Yeah, I do.
And we were like, okay, fuck, this is great, because actually it had all the energy and all the sort of incendiary good stuff that we'd love in a brief. And it went for us from being a rebrand for EA to being, would you like to play a part in this moment? And at that point, you have Uncommon's interest, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I love that.
Nice. Who on the EA Sports side were you working most closely with? Tell us a little bit about the team over there.
Yeah, David Jackson is I guess would be my counterpoint over there. DJ, I mean, he's a really impressive individual. I don't know if you guys have ever spoken to DJ or know him, but I mean, that organization in general, actually, I think has a very high articulate and intellectual level. I think it's really, really good place, full of very ambitious people who all know what they want. But DJ, I think, was very rare in that I think he sought us out and understood our work, and then sought us out for more of the same. And the nature of the relationship we entered into was incredibly candid from day one, which is actually how we like it. And he was pretty punchy, and he was like, look, I've heard you're good, but I don't know if you are, and are you up for it? And this is a big deal for us. And we did that thing where I went toe to toe a little bit. I was like, all right back at you. I've heard you guys guff on and don't do anything. So, is this a we're going to do it brief? Truthfully, the way I phrased it was, I think I said something like, there are either smash it briefs or don't fuck it up briefs. And my fear was it was a don't fuck it up brief. By that, I mean, a lot of clients, when they enter into something as big as this, they'll just be like, let's just make it happen. Just making it happen is success. And it was like, no. In our terms, it's not. When you get to divorce FIFA and you get to reestablish what you stand for and how you look and feel and the voice you have and the energy you have, you can either do that with an attempt at invisibility, or you can do that to smash it and be referred to. And so this language of reference points and that sort of stuff was something we talked about a lot from the start. So there was this ridiculous little alpha off, I think, from day one that we had. But it was very healthy, I think, because it was like he sort of came and arguably asked for the best from us and us the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you say those those intense feelings of, either smash it or don't F it up, it's a massive opportunity and a massive responsibility. What do you think were some of the biggest challenges at the start of the project from your perspective? So were there any yellow flags initially? You're like, okay, well, this might be switching from the smash it to, or vice versa?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd argue most design briefs of that scale are not that, and I honestly, I just think we spent a month or so suspicious, basically, that they didn't mean it. I mean, it's a common thing, which is if you want people who ferociously care about what they do, have a personal investment in it, well, of course, you're going to say it's a smash it brief. But if by smash it, you mean don't offend my stakeholders, that's very, very different. So there was a bit of suspicion there, which was, okay, well, let's just put our money where our mouth is. And I think our first foray into it, to be candid, guys, we did a load of work. And we were slightly hedging our bets, and he kind of came back and went, what's all this? It's a bit crap. Are you going to bring it or not? And we were like, oh, shit, okay. Now that spoke volumes to me, because that told me that he really came to us for what we do. It was a great little slap, but it was also a massive motivator, because I was like, okay, if I come back and we bring it now, I can then hold this guy to account, because we have this deal now. We've had this sort of unspoken deal where this is the level. And I use it so many times now when we're talking about the way we build client relationships and partnerships, which is that if that's the nature of your partnership, it's not about pleasing people or comfort, quite the opposite. I think that's an incredibly healthy place to start. So in hindsight, I actually think it was one of the best things that could have happened.
It's so true, that level of trust and honesty and openness and doing the right thing, right, for the better of the work and the client.
We don't often think about this, but I think most of the time a studio and a client will have a different list. And the client will have a list that says, please my FD, complete rebranding project on time, don't miss game air date, blah. And we'll have a list saying, create massive public sculpture, and often, those two things don't really meet. And actually that's where the bad stuff happens. And actually, I think our list was pretty similar. Quite early, we established that we wanted this moment to be something that was referred to. We wanted to have made the best of it. We definitely wanted a narrative that told the fans of the game, probably the biggest game on the planet, by the way, that they were for them. So it wasn't a design project in many ways, in that it was like, it's popping up on It's Nice That with, do we all like this color? It was like, this is going to be discussed in the public forum in a way that nothing else we've ever worked on will, and are we on the same place? So yeah, it was thrilling.
Love that. I know Blake's going to get into the creative process from here, but I wanted to ask quickly, talk about a little bit about the level of research that you had to do. How equipped were you already with what they had? How much did you have to dig in deeper and find out for yourself?
Yeah, we did loads of that. I mean, you do it kind of naturally, but I tell you what also dawned on us was, their competitors aren't really other video games as much as absolutely everything else. And like everything else in the world, if you think about the biggest video game in the world, 150 million players daily or something crazy. And you look at it and you go, okay, well, we're competing with popular culture. We're competing with Netflix. We're competing with Spotify. We're competing with YouTube. And so at that point you go, well, our research as far as FIFA is concerned, 100%, in its history. But really we looked into football writ large and what that might mean. What is football culture now? Where, people are removing sponsors' cans from the front of a press conference, or where people are pulling up their shirt to make statements, or where clubs are refusing sponsors. All of this started to really sort of give us clues that actually the role of a football club and what a club might mean is an incredibly special thing. And so that's really the conversation we started to have is, what is the biggest football club in the world? And what does it stand for? And what does it mean to every one of its players? So we did loads of research there, not just in a design and aesthetic fashion, but really in what it meant to be a part of a club and what clubs stood for. And, we looked at everything from, some really beautiful stories within football clubs. If you look at the origin stories of a lot of football clubs, they don't come from football at all. They come from hardship, or they come from wanting to come together to fight something, or they come from not being allowed to do something. So there's all these incredible stories. And I think, so this just divorce from FIFA gave them the friction and a moment, I think, to speak to what football in general was really about. Because let's be clear, FIFA is not it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty ironic that what you just outlined is the essence of the sport, and FIFA as a enterprise, as a large global organization, does not represent that anymore. Even if it's just from a reputation standpoint or a perception standpoint, it does not represent that anymore. No, it doesn't.
And I just wish I'm just at odds with all the goodwill and the innate love of that sport and everything it stands for. Why do they continually almost goad the people that love it? That's what I just think it's insane. When you look at the strategy of that brand, you're like, everyone would get behind you if you made decisions that we thought were based on what everybody loved. They would give you money, they'd deepen their relationship. Instead, you almost go back to the opposite. I tell you what, we're going to make a new league that's completely prestige. Or no, I tell you what, we're going to make an incredible new rules system that takes away all the things we've grown to love about the game. You're like, what are you doing? Anyway, so sorry, I just find that totally frustrating.
I know. Yeah, we could have a whole separate hour-long conversation about that.
As an aside, by the way, please see a piece of work we made called The Big Gay Donation, where as a result of bribery, we all know they held the World Cup in, an unfriendly,
Qatar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Unfriendly place for LGBTQIA people. We basically thought, well, if you can bribe them to hold the World Cup there, you can bribe them to hold it somewhere nice. So we made a crowdfunded bribe called The Big Gay Donation. Anyway, they didn't like that very much. So anyway, obviously this is right up our street. This brief comes along. This is the narrative, and then you ask yourself, well, if we can help not just aesthetically, but behaviorally define the principles of this new game, wouldn't that be amazing going forward? If you could make all the decisions the way you wish they were made, would be an amazing thing to play a part in. So that's the deal.
Yeah. So you did some research, you got up to speed a little bit on what, the sport even represents, what clubs represent. And then tell us more about where did you go from there? You mentioned there was sort of one round where the client came back, DJ, and's like, seriously, this is it. And that gave you some leverage. But tell when did that happen? Was that super early on? Was that
that was really early on. That was honestly, so we love to get ahead of it. And we do this for a variety of reasons, but every meeting we have with a potential client partner, whoever they are, whatever size, will bring thinking, will bring work. And the reason we do that is you can theoretically talk a great game. It's not until you see someone with the product in front of them that you understand exactly how they're going to behave with you. So we brought some stuff. It was all right. It was better than decent. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't game changing. It wasn't whatever. And he kind of went, is this it? And then I was like, okay, fine. What did dawn on me was football in general, particularly, but sport in general is pretty tired as a visual narrative. It's kind of, it follows design trends. You see it in everything from way that Nike, frankly, are reflecting it through to all the other brands that play in that space. It feels pretty formulaic. It feels quite predictable. There's lots of tropes. There's lots of language. It's over familiar. Visually, there's a tremendous amount of common ground and sort of done stuff. And so the other thing we were like aware of is, how do we not make something that's just a flash in the pan? Oh, they used that typeface that was cool for 12 months, or fucking hell, they used that aesthetic treatment that Hawk did once. You know what I mean? I'm a bit like, right, how do we remove trend really and try and find something more immortal? That was the task. So when we talk about reference points, I'm like, I want people in 10 years to go, do you remember when those guys did that thing? And so we were looking really for a deeper story, a deeper idea, and a deeper narrative within it. And so we started looking at stuff, and obviously, it comes up and the ball looks like the world. I'm like, okay, let's kill that immediately. That's obviously fucking just disgusting. What else have we got that's new? And then suddenly Hader, who led the design team, turned up and he went, "No, I've got this thing. I think it's super interesting. Look, if you get this here," and he had a screen grab from like a 2012 version of the game or something. And he went, "Look, this triangle's been around for ages. And actually I found a way to, if I can draw the FC into the triangle." I was like, whoa. And suddenly it was just like, okay, that's amazing. So what you're saying is you've drawn from a truth that's been at the heart of that game the entire time. And you've gone, well, where are we going to look for this symbol of control, right? Literally in a moment of change, okay? Where are we going to look for this symbol of taking back control? Where you're going to look at the control icon that's lived inside the game for 20 odd years. I was just like, that is a gift. A narrative like that. At that point, I mean, right or wrong, I was like, it's unignorable. You can't disagree with it. So you may not like the color I do it in, or you may not like the rounded edges of the triangle. It's irrelevant. The actual core idea is just bulletproof. And I was just like, that is just gold, man. And then we went mental. We found that triangles existed in football. The Dutch football system's based on them. Polygons and triangular polygons exist in the very makeup of the game, from the graphics to the pixels. And we were just like, man, this is just crazy.
And once you discover something like that, is there an option B?
No, I mean, honestly, no.
Right.
I think we presented something else. I'll tell you what we did, actually. We presented something that was almost so radical in its approach, it didn't offer a system as an alternative, because I was like, well, there's no better idea I've got for you, but I do have an approach that might be better, which is actually, imagine we didn't have a graphic logo and we just did everything within a frame, or, it just approached it very, and it was Renegade. It was kind of interesting, but it wasn't that. And I think
was the strategy to present them such a wild other option that it pushes them to an easier option like a triangle, because you all loved that?
I know people say that. No, I just was like, I want to show them something else I'm not ashamed of. So we have this thing which is no passengers. So there's no passenger work. I'll never show a single piece of work that we wouldn't be proud to make, not one. And if we only get to one piece of work for that meeting, then that's all you're getting. I'm never going to show another. And so we found something that we thought was super interesting. It would have made a really unique canvas, but it just was nowhere near on that level. And we betrayed ourselves. Like, we opened up the meeting and I basically just said, look, I've got the answer. We've got it. No, it might not be perfect, but we've got it. And, you can, if you hate it, let me know. And I think I was a quarter of the way through it and I got a text off DJ going, this fucking nailed it, or something like that. And I was just like, yeah, great. And so from that point, it was, my stomach was then filled with acid and nervousness, and I almost shat myself 52 times, because essentially I was then worried that this beautiful thing we'd managed to land on was going to get somehow spoiled, sullied, unbought, or not made.
Yeah.
Which is then you spend the next 9 months doing that. So different problems. But,
and that at any moment, this beautiful core design could get scrapped. One person's feedback or one email, one phone call, and it all goes away, because that happens, especially at this level with so many people kind of weighing in, giving feedback.
This is exactly right. This is the mark of I think their real quality at EA. PMAR and DJ and all those guys, Ben. I think when you look at what you have to do in an organization like that to make not just this work, but that change happen, okay, to decide to leave FIFA, then to somehow drum up the power and the scale to go and recruit everybody into it anyway, all the clubs, all the partners, and then to go and buy a visual with a new story and invest in it completely and not sully it and not compromise it. I mean, that's a unique skill set in its own right. It's one completely alien to us here, and it's like, I think to go through that journey and not just leave it intact, but actually make the best of it, and to have pushed us to use it and launch it in ways we hadn't imagined. I have an immense amount of respect for that skill set and for the investment and the graft it must have taken. If I'm sat there with those nerves, he must have been sat there with nerves I didn't even know about on nights before meetings I wasn't aware he was having. It's like all that sort of stuff, I think I can't give enough credit to.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say quickly that whole backstory and empathizing in that situation is exactly why we started this podcast. Because you can look at finished work and you can judge it all day long in a vacuum, whether you like it or not. But recognizing the amount of energy and psychology and charisma it takes to sell something, that's really where the magic is. And those champions on the client side that have to deal with it, that put their neck out on the line, I mean, they really should be celebrated. So I love that.
100%. You're an email or a badly judged conversation from failure every time.
Yeah.
And genuinely, like, do I choose to chat to him by the lift? Do I choose to call a meeting? Do I choose to make it official? Do I send it on a WhatsApp? These are the decisions that make or break the things that we wish we could make. They are, whether we like it or not. And some people talk to us at Uncommon, they're like, oh, you guys must have amazing clients. I'm like, no, our client, we have really good clients. But the jeopardy remains, the same jeopardy that we all feel remains. And you have at some point got to give it over. The other thing to say is when you meet people, you can ask who the decision makers are and all the above. But an organization like that, okay, I have no idea how that's going to go. You get a new CEO, the whole thing's scrapped.
Yes.
Oh, there's an amazing campaign where suddenly it's come out and it's a Make Poverty History campaign. It's got a triangle as its logo. You're fucked. Like, just life has a way of throwing these things at you sometimes, so I'm well aware of that, and I'm constantly, I suppose, pregnant with jeopardy.
Nils, I thought the mock-up of Benzema with the banner in his mouth with the logo on it, or holding it, I thought it was a mock-up, man. I was like, oh, look at that, that's lovely. They put it on there as a mock-up, and then I was like, oh no, that's in reality that is the that's a microcosm into how big this is.
That's what I mean. That game, and even this is maybe interesting to talk about too. Like, often design, we do it in a vacuum, and I think people do talk about design now in the wider spectrum. I think they do, but I think majority of the time it's treated like this invisible process that we then unveil, and an organization slightly talks about it, and some nerds over here might write about it, and it may peak. This was like, well, no, how can this entire moment be reflective of change and values? And so when we choose this new logo, how's it going to go out into the world? And so we were sort of like, well, wouldn't it be amazing to make a design explainer film, except that was borderline a brand voice, brand narrative thing? So we made a film with Dave, who's a rapper in the UK, where he basically, it's dressed up like it's cool, it's about triangles, but really it's a design guidelines explainer film, I think. And I was like, well, what if we drop that? And then suddenly that drops, and we put it on tifos around the world in team colors. We stuck it in media. I mean, man, we made crazy stuff. Some stuff didn't make it. We tried to make some piss cubes, those things in urinals that clean the urinal. We wanted to make some of those. Yeah, they didn't quite make the cut, sadly. Sorry, DJ. But look, the point was, if we were really in the culture, where would we be? So people got their hair done. We made like grills. It was awesome. There was like a pie shop and so actually the rollout was as important as the work. And I don't think enough people think openly about that. I think the design industry are a bit snobby, and they kind of go, well, it's not our job to think about how it makes its way into the world. And I'm like, well, of course it is. It's a public spectacle. The act of design is a making, is an act of making. And so whether you like it or not, people will respond to it. I've always thought that avoidance of it just irritated me. You can't not design. So whether you like it or not, man, something is happening. And the only choice you get is how they digest it. So we've always loved the thought that we might have what we call a hole in the idea, which is a way for people to get involved or own it or comment on it or share it. We talk a lot about that. So actually with this, it was perfect in that sense. You could render it in your colors, you could create collabs with it. The guys at Pepsi did one, or if you were a fan crew or a gaming crew, you could adopt it in your way. So, that was something worth worth mentioning maybe.
I love it. Nils, you hit on it some, but I would imagine like, you had that presentation where DJ texted you and he's like, man, you crushed it. And then DJ and team continue to like socialize it, give you air cover to get it approved. But I would imagine you had to probably like present that work a bunch and evolve it a bunch. Is that true?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there was a lot of evolution. And, Hader and the guys were incredibly studious and diligent around its uses. I mean, just to speak to it, there's loads of hygiene factors that you don't even, outside of is it good and do we like it and what's the narrative? Like, how can it adopt partners? How can it sit on a referee's shoulder? How could it possibly be a sponsor's badge? How does this work next to the Nike tick? Or how does this work next to the Reebok tick? How does it work at small sizes? Can it work in multiple colors? How does it work when it's pixelated? Is it better in real life? Like all of these incredible hygiene factors for an entertainment brand like that suddenly then had to be answered and asked. And so there were loads of iterations of the logo working in those sizes and stress testing against all that. There was also the narrative around it, which is, what does this mean for photography? So we had this thing which is 200% football, which is we're about bringing people much, much closer to this experience in a visceral way. So how can we do that? If we're the world's game and we're literally the biggest fans of this game, well, how can we bring everybody into it in a way they weren't before? FIFA are about over there, please stay over there. We wanted to be almost the opposite. And so there was an entire load of work around that, and so, yeah, there was a lot of work going forwards, and there were a couple of backwards and forwards on it. And there were a couple of decisions where we did worry about it a bit. They were like, oh, what if we did this, or could it sit with something? And we were like, oh no, and I'll tell you the good thing though, is once you've got an idea like that, and there's a few other examples that we've done, but once you've got an idea like that on the wall, you can always drag people back to it. You've got like a compass now, as opposed to, I think, this slightly sliding amorphous thing that happens through an approval process. Well, this guy over here loves blue, and back in the 50s, that was so can we? And you kind of end up doing this weird. Whereas here it was like, no, this is the purity of the idea. This has to be the thing that we communicate. How modern is it? How sharp is it? Is it too brutal? Those are chats you can have. Tonally, we talked a lot about, is it friendly or is it scary? Is there a little bit of the military to it, or is there a bit of whatever but actually in the end, it was just really, really cool. Legibility was huge. Some of the stuff we didn't look like an F. But overall, yeah, the approval process was long and it was quite detailed. We put lots of decks together, lots of mock-ups, of course. But I think once people were on board, they were on board. And, the typefaces, cry-off and so on, all of that other work was happening in tandem. We were working hand in glove, which was incredibly fascinating with the actual crew developing the game. So we were looking at load screens and idle screens. So, when you're sat there and you leave the game for a bit and the footballers just sort of limbering up and jiggling their head around and stuff, we were like, well, what happens there? And can we make that richer and more interesting? And, so it was an incredibly fascinating process. But yes, I spent the entire time basically terrified until it was in the world.
You probably had it memorized by then.
Oh my God, dude. I could have done the pitch literally in an elevator. I mean, that was half of it. I'm pretty sure, by the way, DJ in particular was a master at that sort of stuff, is it a moment of, what did he say? Is it a moment of change or a change of, I can't remember. Anyway, he had some brilliant language. But I can't imagine, actually he's also got to remind everybody around him probably of the appetite for that change, because otherwise everyone's at risk, So like I said, I can't impress upon you enough that I felt like we had real partners in it, and actually, to be fair as well, to your comment about who you end up partnering with, I didn't ever feel like they were asking us to try things that were for folly. They were all to the benefit of the brand or its reach or some sort of use case. So actually, it was incredibly productive and functional. They weren't saying, the CEO likes circles, so could it be a circle? It was never any of that sort of crap. It was all
good.
Yeah. It was good. Not every project's like that, obviously.
True. Yeah. Now, a lot of the responsibility falls on EA Sports to make this launch and to make this big announcement. Your partners, but ultimately they have to take it and own it. So how did that go? How was that pass off? How did they launch the big announcement? I know we talked about some elements, but were there some favorite moments in the launch too? How did they do?
Oh my God. I mean, the first thing to say is they let us write in, and they don't have to. You know, I imagine the game itself, the nature of that video, the nature of social, the relationships they have with influencers and key figures and key footballers, all of that is sacred, really, if you think about what they've built. And they were very, very open to us, not only having ideas about it, but crafting the elements, crafting the scripts, you know, really working on the exact wording of a tweet or a statement or whatever, you know, all working on these decks. If you imagine these decks that go to somebody like David Beckham or to Zidane, how you frame that deck is everything. And in terms of how they receive it and want to be a part of it and all the above. So they were very, very open about that. And what you'll find with Uncommon is the moment that trust is there, we'll crawl over broken glass to make the best of it. You know, and I don't think most clients understand that, which is, you know, no one is trying to meddle or fuck up those relationships, quite the opposite. All we're sort of trying to do every time is make the best of every single interaction. You know, if every one of those people or every one of those channels is an opportunity or a chance, how do we not just post it there? There's always something better you can do. It's where the Dave film came from. You know, it's like we could have just released the logo and gone, hey, what do you think? You know, and apparently the press release, it said triangles. I was like, no, come on. You know, so we had Dave explain it. We had cameos. You know, we had everybody like you saw it. You know, and the other thing to say is it did this really useful thing where the blur between the real world and the gaming world started to meld. So Beckham's post had the triangle above his head the way it would on the game, except it was a real shot of Beck's, you know, and the Zidane one also. So there was this great kind of I'm on board spirit that started to happen by the way that they placed it or embraced it within their world. So the short answer to that, sorry, is they really went for it, and I was impressed and also awed and scared by the power of that.
Yeah.
You know, most of the biggest clubs in the world embraced it. We did loads of massive tifos and outdoor campaigns. I went to the Spurs game around launch, and it was everywhere. You know, and I mean, when I say everywhere, I mean scarves in a kebab stand. There was merchandise we were selling alongside the OG merch, and you know, it was just incredible. You know, and then suddenly you're seeing it on the pitch, and you know, you're like, it's nuts. All the hoardings suddenly just switched. It was like, oh my God, you know, stadium of 60,000 people. So you're like, okay, fine, this is happening.
Incredible. Yeah. Because a lot of times people outside the brand work don't realize that it's not all a light switch moment. Some of it is.
Yeah.
Some of it is switched on and off between 24 hours, but there's a lot that happens in this phased approach to launch. So were you all just super excited and waiting with bated breath on the light switch moments, right?
100%, and feeling incredibly privileged, man. Really, really humbled by it. Like you basically project, don't you, an innate confidence and belief until something happens. That's the act of creativity, is you sort of make something up and then you have to believe in it and get everyone else to believe in it, and then it becomes real. And this was, though, one of those ones where I was like really pinching myself thinking, oh shit, this is actually happening. And it's on all the hoarding boards, and it's in the halftime show, and it's on the program, and it's on the scarves, and then honestly, I was just on my phone. I was addicted to social for 2 weeks, you know, and there was this WhatsApp group just pinging 24 hours a day with the crew, just going, oh my God, have you seen this? You know, yeah. And the reaction, hopefully in a really good way, was divisive as well. It wasn't unanimous love at all. You know, it was like, what's this and what's it all about? And, you know, but ultimately, I think the way it was launched and the way people could find themselves within it and the amount of people that got on board quickly was insane. You know, it was trending, I think, on socials within 3.5 hours of launch or something, you know.
Oh, wow.
And the BBC, yeah, I mean, the BBC referred to it as the biggest entertainment rebrand in history. I was like, oh shit. Now, I was like, genuinely, I'm loving that. And that's in the case study now, obviously. But I was like, oh my fucking God. When they say something like that, you're like, yeah, it probably was. But we got so deep in it, I was like noodling around the edge of a triangle. I'd completely forgotten that at points.
Yeah.
You know, I think rollouts like this are sometimes hard to swallow for some people. However, the ones that are successful and the ones that maybe go in the category of too much blowback usually comes down to the rationale and the story.
That's right.
And the concept that you have with the triangle is so multi-layered and such a like dead on fit for the sport, for the game, for the visuals, like for the category. All of it checks all the boxes. People just like, whether they like it or not, they're like, okay, I get it. And maybe they have, you know, negative feedback, but they get the idea and then they move on. It's usually when there's no idea at all, like when Elon Musk flipped the switch on X and everyone's just like, wait, what's happening? And there was no idea.
Literally.
That's when everyone was like, wait, what's going on? And we're all still saying like, wait, what was the plan?
Yeah.
we're still wondering that.
Fear. I mean, with any of this type of work, I agree with you. I mean, Elon knows though that Elon being as indulgent as he was the idea maybe. And actually he didn't give a flying fuck about the X because he knew everyone would talk about Elon, right or wrong, by the way. There is a strategy in that. My worst fear is just nothing. My worst fear is, we've just made a new logo, and everyone's like, oh, God, like what? Hey, have you? Like that. That's honestly, I think that's crushing. And I think when you look at real reference point work, sometimes actually is ugly or brash or really divisive. So the London 2012 Olympics, right? Absolutely disgusting. Sorry, just really. But almost in hindsight, one of the only ones you remember. You're 22 in Germany and you've got that probably. Discuss, I don't know. And I'm just sort of being pokey, but I'm like, I think sometimes that stuff is important. Heatherwick's torch obviously had an idea inside it. The way you refer to this work, I think it had something in it that people could get their heads around, that we all light it. The act of lighting is the idea, not the torch. Okay, got it. But you're right. There are very few acts of design that do that. And I guess the biggest fear is just invisibility or passivity.
It doesn't seem like you had apathy in this case. So mostly reactions, it sounds like, were mostly positive, thrilling, excited. Some naysayers, but tell us a little bit more about that.
I'll tell you what happened. So it was mostly positive. I was like, yeah, fucking cool logo, but I bet the game's shit. Because they're on to the next. They're on to the next, man, all the time. So they were like, yeah, absolutely love it. And, oh my God, this is so fucking cool. And have you seen that film with Dave? And it was doing the round. It was like huge. But then the immediate conversation was, I bet they screw it up now. I bet the game's really rubbish or whatever. So anyway, thank God the game was the biggest pre-sold game they've ever done and actually really, really well received. So thank fuck on that front. Man, honestly, and on a real one, man, I just, I go downstairs into my son's room and, he's on screen and my logo's on the game he's playing. I'm like, great, that's it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't get to be cool a lot in my house at all. And that was one thing you had to accept.
Take that win and extend it, right? Now, when people, let's go back to when you did have some naysayers, what might they have said? Because the story was so invincible, right? It was so spot on. If somebody found something to question or challenge, what might it have been?
I can't remember really. I mean, some people were like, what were they like? I think there was a bit of, I don't get it, from a couple of people who hadn't seen, whatever, and they saw it blowing up. But if you hadn't heard the story somehow, then I think they were just like, why are you all talking about it? It's like a triangle. Some people, I think it got a bit like, what did someone say? I think they said it looks like a Desert Storm badge or something, a couple of people. And then there's always the people that go, oh, that's like that triangular logo from the 70s by, Akira Kurosawa. You're like, okay, there's always some of them. I mean, I'm like, for fuck's sake. So fine. But no, mostly it was good. I think the people, you're right. If we managed to get the story told, which was why I was so desperate to do that, people did get it, to your point, and it was unignorable at that point. But,
and there will always be folks who are referential, right? Yes. And need to challenge it and need to find something. Oh, well, it's not a net new idea.
Yeah.
But hopefully you can push past it and the excitement and the story win.
Yeah. I think in hindsight, I think it's a great story. And I, like you, I was obsessed with the luck that we landed on an idea that was outside of preference. I'm not in an argument about aesthetics at that point. So that was the blessing, really. Harder to do on every brief than it sounds, by the way.
Yeah.
Amazing.
There's a lot in this work to celebrate the mark. We've talked a lot about the logo and the triangle. There's also some of the color strategy and the custom typefaces and just the overall look and feel, the tone, like with the launch video, other partnerships. What about for you though? Like, what were you most excited about or most proud of with all of this work?
The narrative, but really that it's sat at the heart of the game. It's in the middle of the actual experience. I mean, how many briefs do you get where you even when you design a company's logo, I know it sounds funny, you want your work to live in culture where people really are. And often it lives on a letterhead or on a headquarters, and that's sort of it. And I think that the serious work actually weirdly, it's in 150 million cars. I think anything you design where you feel like it's really living in the world and playing a great role there and being a part of something there and building a story that didn't exist before, that's the thing I was most excited about, man. I mean, I do think people, right or wrong, love or hate it, will refer to it. I think they'll go whenever someone now, I think, is tasked with a brand like that or a rebrand like that, I think it will feature in a conversation, because I think it's one of those rare moments, not because of the work necessarily, because of the moment. We were gifted that moment. And I'm just so grateful that the client and us approached it the same way, because I think there's a lot of moments like that are, can we just get through it? And how quiet can we be about the change? And how little can we be noticed? I really mean that. Some people's job, I think, is obviously to disappear, which in the industry of communication and design and making, I find ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it's the safe route, and no one, especially I see it in CPG world a lot. No one wants to be the one that broke the recognition or, the Tropicana packaging, and then the cash machine goes down. So it becomes about design, decision-making from a place of fear, more so than saying
100%.
the main objective is to not be invisible. So it's pretty cool that the brief from day one was, let's really go for it.
Well, no, I was relieved. That was exactly my fear. I mean, can you imagine? I know it sounds awful, but can you imagine, I just knew it was going to be a big endeavor. And if you imagine you spent a year and a half crafting something that looked like just football, the amorphous game of football, and it went, I think it would have killed me. Thomas Heatherwick's a friend of the studio, the architect and designer, and he said something really interesting. I was talking about that project, and he said, God knows we work on buildings, and you can spend 5 years working on a building to have it scrapped, or worse, you can spend 5 years working on a building to have them take away the decision making at the end and make it incredibly normal. The idea of investing 5 years of your life. So I mean it sincerely, which is the life of a studio is finite. We're not going to exist forever with this energy and intensity and all the above. And what we spend our time on is everything. It's our output, it's the story of Uncommon. And if we spend a year and a half making something, bland, that's worse than bland. It's a crime for the studio that brilliant people have spent their time doing that. That's the thing I'm most grateful for, is that we got to play a part in a moment like that, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I love that perspective. What are some other key takeaways or lessons you might have from this year and a half worth of work in this massive project?
Well, I saw the power of a moment like that within an organization to do other things. And I was lucky enough to witness DJ and his team navigate other rooms, and he brought me into other spaces, and we became kind of advisors and are still advisors on a variety of other topics and other platforms now. But I saw the power of a moment like this and the perceived success of a moment like this to really organize a company and to really give a company new energy and new momentum. I know everyone says that, but often we forget as leaders, particularly on the client side maybe, that a redesign moment like this is a chance to have a conversation with everybody that works there about why they come to work and about what they feel and about their nature in relationship with the game. So we were like, well, that was really interesting. And we've applied that to lots of other learnings now. So, when we go into another room, we're like, well, Sirius, for instance, is not just a conversation about a new logo for Sirius XM. It's a conversation with 150 million people who have it in their cars. It's a conversation with every artist that lives on the platform about why you do what you do. And suddenly that's a powerful thing. We've learned the absolute value and belief in don't assume you're invisible. Don't assume no one will care. Assume they'll care and then give them reasons to care and then be ferocious about it. Some people are like, Uncommon won't shut up. They constantly I'm like, fine. I'm absolutely fine with that. I think too many of us don't give ourselves permission to assume that we matter. And, any act of design, I think, matters. And if you believe in that, the way you put it into the world is as important as what you make. And so I think that's something that most designers are a bit worried about believing in.
Yeah. It takes a lot of confidence and courage to say that and to believe that. It's easier to just, ironic, and much like the work itself, it's easier to sort of more slink away out of the spotlight because it's safer.
I went to a creative thing between my old job and starting the studio. I went to a creative festival in Germany. They're pretty brutal over there. And all down the left-hand wall, they had these fly posters which had blank gravestones on. and people were writing on them. They were supposed to write on them. Someone wrote content solutions on one of them. And I was like, okay, I get it. And they didn't mean content solutions. What they meant was, if you spent your life making content, have you spent your life? Well, that was what I took from it, actually. I have no fucking idea why they're on the wall. But what I took from it was, we don't have forever, really. And when you start a studio, because it's such a personal investment, it's not a job and you're trying to get through and please somebody. You start it and you go, Christ, okay, I've got this long to do this. And what do I really wish it was? And what do these hours and minutes stand for? And sorry, I know it's a long-winded thing, but I'm like, when you do that, you don't wake up and go, I'm going to be humble about this, or I'm a bit nervous. You wake up and go, God, I just want everything that we've all sweated for here to matter in the world, and to be seen and to be witnessed and be referred to and reviled. Fine. But otherwise, why? Otherwise, why do it?
Yeah. I love your ambition with that. That's not a natural, way to see the world. So that, I think that's a unique gift that you have, is that, that ambition. Yeah.
I mean, we said, dude, I don't know, man, fucking hell. When you start a company, maybe some people don't do this. I'm very mechanical. I believe unless you manifest a dream or a narrative for yourself, you won't have one. You don't find them by accident. They're not just lying around. And I don't think good is enough. We're going to be good. I don't think that's it. We were like, well, look, we said two things. One is, what if we were the place that was on the receiving end of the most influential and important briefs of our time? That was what we wanted to make. And that was a load of old guff we wrote, in week 6. But that's ultimately what the EA brief was, I think. And ultimately what some of the other briefs we've got are. And I think if you believe you're creating a studio for moments and partners like that, then maybe you'll be one,
Yeah.
And I think that's it. The other thing we said, which maybe you'll come out of this, I don't know, is someone asked me a question when I was in my previous life, and they said, how do I go? And it was a pitch. So cunning pitch question. They said, Nils, how do I go from being a brand that sells crap to people to being a brand that people wish existed? And I thought that was a punchy question. And then I was like, well, never mind you, man. How do I name an agency or studio that the real world wishes existed? And so we were trying to make that. And so, that's why we make features and we do other stuff too. And we make our own brands, is because hopefully someday someone is sat third row in the cinema and they say, oh, fuck, Uncommon. Or they're looking at the back of a pack and they go, oh, and that's the dream, really.
Yeah, I love it. All right. So with EA Sports FC, what do you hope the future holds for that brand, for that organization? What like in your wildest dreams, what do you hope the future holds for them?
So DJ, bless him, I mean, he brilliantly educated me that frankly, he was like, it all launched or whatever. I get this phone call about 6 weeks later going, this is literally just started. This is literally you haven't even finished the start yet. Never mind about it being done. He was like, the logo, the mark, the brand world, everything. You're just still establishing it. So get your head around that. So first of all, there's that. The second one was that currently the relationship they have with football, which I think is really fascinating, is they would try to reflect what was happening in football, in the real world. So what would happen is a player would sign for someone and they'd move in the game, or something would happen over here, a rule would change and it would happen in the game. Wouldn't it be amazing if the game changed and then football had to reflect it? That's what we're trying to do. So wouldn't it be brilliant if we did things within the game that were more challenging, more forward thinking, more open, and then the game had to reflect it? That's, I think, a great ambition for that brand.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. It makes me think of the introduction in FC24 of female players.
Yeah.
And you can select a super team and you can have female players competing with male players.
That's exactly right. That's an exact example of it. And there's about 25 other things like that I'm clawing to make happen within that game. But I mean, mate, they are now, and this is what I mean by the power of an idea to do that. They're sat around thinking about that. And there's a lot of people saying, well, do they have the right? And I'm like, well, if 200 million people globally are playing it, they probably do.
Yeah.
Nils,
this was amazing. Thank you so much. I don't know if I have any other questions. Tracy, anything else come to mind for you?
No, I mean, the only thing that comes to mind is, what would you say to, internal, client partners to make sure that they are prepared for this? I don't even know if this goes anywhere on the podcast, but what would you say to a chief marketing officer, somebody internal who really needs to champion this internally? What would you tell them?
two things really. One is to really inquire whether it is a smash it or don't fuck it up brief, and be honest with yourself, and be really honest with yourself, actually. Because there are people, by the way, who are really good at doing the don't fuck it up brief, and they're good too, but they're different. And I don't think enough people are honest about that. And the other is to set what we call a cultural ambition with your agency or studio. So not we want to sell 200 million games. We want to be a reference point for a rebrand in history, or we want to change the dynamic in sport about how, what it means to be a football club. Like, these things are cultural ambitions. And the reason I say that is it's a disgusting trick, but your studio or agency, should you define one of those, will crawl over broken glass and through fire in order to do that work. Do you know what I mean? Because it matters. You know what I mean? So I think that, and then pick somebody based on that shared view of the world. The last thing is, like, creativity isn't an algorithm or a piece of software. All you have is how you see it. And what you get to do for a brief period of time is hang around with people who might see it a bit like you. And I think that's where brilliant work happens, is a few people come together and see the world a certain way. And I mean that sincerely. Like, look at the YBAs, Warhol's Factory, the grunge scene. Like, pick any emerging scene that put a dent in things, and they're a result really of seeing the world a certain way together.
I love that. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Nils, anything else to add? Anything that we didn't cover?
I've wanged on far too much. Thank you for having me. I don't think so, man. I mean, I hope you've got what you guys want out of it. And,
yeah, I think this is incredible.
Yeah.
And the pub's calling your name, and I think you've earned it.
Yeah, I've just
you've earned it.
I've been thinking about lager for the last 6 minutes. I don't know if it makes any sense.
We've detained you long enough, I think, but this was an incredible conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thanks, Nils. We'll talk soon, and we'll keep you updated on the release schedule.
Thank you, man. All right, guys. I'll see you later.
Cheers. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.